Lord of our lives and guardian of our days, light when we wander in darkness, hope when our flags fly low, we come before thee thankful for this day, pleased that thou art the way, the truth, and the life. Keep us in your care and provide for us your grace, so that as we go our lights will shine, our wills will work what shall be pleasing unto you, and our lives give witness to your love. Bless all who labor in this place. Bless all who legislate in this place. Bless all who struggle in this place. For we ask it in your name, and for your sake we pray and ask it all. Amen.
Will members please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, please sound the chimes. Thank you for your prayer. Will the members please indicate their presence by voting aye on the roll call machine? Have all members voted? Some members approaching their chairs. Have all members voted? Clerk will take the roll. Roll call machine showing 96 members present. The House is duly constituted to do business. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Hopkins.
Speaker, sir, absent members be excused in accordance with the House rules.
Motion made and seconded that absent members be excused in accordance with the House rules. Without objection, so ordered. Gentleman from Hopkins.
Speaker, I move, sir, that the reading of the journal dated Thursday, January the 9th, 1997 be dispensed with and the same approved.
Motion made and seconded that the reading of the journal dated Thursday, January 9th, 1997 be dispensed with and same be approved. Without objection, so ordered. The next item of business is introduction of resolutions.
House Resolution 3, a concurrent resolution adjourning the 1997 organizational session of the General Assembly, sine die, introduced by Representative Stumbo.
The next item of business is report of committees. Gentleman from Floyd.
Mr. Chairman, I yield to the gentleman from Elliott for the purpose of reporting on the Labor and Industry Committee's.
Chair recognizes gentleman from Elliott, 99.
Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, the Interim Committee on Labor and Industry, as you well know, has focused its activities on reviewing all aspects of workers' compensation program in anticipation of the special session just concluded. Former Chairman Cyrus would like to commend and thank the fellow members who served on the Labor and Industry for their diligence in this most thankless task, which nevertheless has resulted in major changes in the workers' comp system. The new approach embodied in House Bill 1 eliminates much of the subjectivity of the old system by moving to a so-called impairment model, based primarily on objective medical findings related to injury or occupational disease. The special fund has been closed to new cases and liability for costs distributed more equitably among major payers. Only time will tell whether all changes will be beneficial, but there is no doubt we are on a new and very different path in that major program. Other topics the Interim Committee has discussed as time permitted included the recent changes in the prevailing wage law, administrative regulations filed by the Labor Cabinet, and changes in the federal minimum wage law. I anticipate that during the remainder of the interim, the committee will closely follow the implementation of the new workers' comp system program as the Department of Workers' Claims moves in this new direction. Mr. Speaker, that concludes my report. I'd be glad to respond to any question members have.
Thank you, gentleman from Elliott. May I have your attention, please? May the chair have your attention? We have with us today three very distinguished guests. You may know that the Council of State Governments is located here in Kentucky. We're very, very fortunate to have the Council of State Governments as a part of our Commonwealth community. And we are fortunate enough today to have the Executive Director of the Council of State Governments with their headquarters in Lexington, Dan Sprague. Would you give Dan a real warm Kentucky applause? We also have with us today the chairman of the Southern Legislative Conference. You know, Senator Rose was the chairman last year of the SLC, and this year we have, all the way from Oklahoma, a 29-year veteran, 26-year veteran of the Oklahoma legislature. That would put him in the general class with the gentleman from Christian 9. But he's been there for a long time as a majority leader of the Oklahoma legislature and the chairman of the Southern Legislative Conference, the Honorable Gilmer Capps from Oklahoma. Mr. President, we're glad to have you here today. We also have a former member of the Legislative Research Commission who is now with the Southern Legislative Conference, Ken Fern. Ken, would you wave, and we're delighted to have you here. I don't think Doug Sicardo is in the room at this point. Thank you so much, gentlemen. We're delighted to have you with us. Gentleman from Floyd.
I yield the gentleman from Bell to report on the activities of the Judiciary Committee, Mr.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Bell 87.
Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen, during the interim Joint Committee on Judiciary has held 4 meetings. During these meetings, the prime topic of study has been the implementation of House Bill 117, which, for those of you that are new here, House Bill 117 was the juvenile code changes that were introduced primarily by my seatmate, the gentleman from Ballard. The committee was charged under the 1996 House Bill 117 with reporting recommendations to the Legislative Research Commission, and those recommendations were transmitted to the commission following the December meeting of the committee. The Secretaries of the Justice Cabinet and the Cabinet for Families and Children also appeared before the committee along with their staffs, and as the newly appointed Commissioner of the Department of Juvenile Justice, Ralph Kelly, also appeared. To tell you the progress on the Juvenile Code, which has been reported includes formation of the Department of Juvenile Justice and the naming of a Commissioner for the Department, transferring personnel, facilities, and funding from the Cabinet for Families and Children to the Department of Juvenile Justice, progress reports on the construction of the new juvenile facility in Breathitt County, with some attendant delays caused by the need to install sewer line to the facility and some changes in the facility plans, and naming of the locations in Newport and Paducah for the 2 new state-operated pre-adjudication juvenile facilities. At the 4th meeting, the committee also heard from a group of persons seeking additional protection for the rights of grandparents who are raising their grandchildren, including matters of custody and the creation of programs for kinship care to defray some of the cost of providing care to grandchildren. Mr. Speaker, if no members have any questions about the activities of the Interim Judiciary Committee, we'll entertain any questions if they do. If not, this report has been reported on their desks and will be submitted as the Interim Judiciary Committee's report.
Thank you so much, gentleman from Bell. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Floyd.
Speaker, I yield the gentleman from Jefferson 38, the chairman of the Licensing and Occupations Committee, for the purpose of giving his report.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Jefferson 38.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Interim Joint Committee on Licensing and Occupations met twice during the interim. The first meeting in September is an organizational session in which we asked the members to rank the issues that we may possibly be dealing with during the coming interim. The second committee meeting was a 2-day session which dealt primarily with issues affecting the state's racing industry. We had speakers from different parts of the country who spoke to us and on some of the problems that we were facing in the racing industry and some of the issues we may be facing in this coming session. In addition to the racing industries, we're also looking at the issue of charitable gaming, possible stricter control on the ABC alcoholic licensing, and also licensure of facilities where individuals may brew their own beer. So that's about what we were into, and we'll continue to meet during the interim. Thank you.
Thank you so much, gentleman from Jefferson. Chair recognizes gentleman from Floyd.
Speaker, I yield the gentleman from Jefferson 31 for the purpose of giving the local government committee report.
Chair recognizes gentleman from Jefferson 31 for a report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Interim Joint Committee on Local Government appointed members to 3 subunits during the interim. We have opted to let these entities complete their work before bringing the full committee together later this winter for further action. This decision was also prompted in part by the creation of a task force on local government taxing structure, which was established by the 1996 General Assembly. We felt that it would be prudent to give the task force time to begin their work because we see the topic of local government finance as one of much importance. In fact, it is possible that some of the task force findings will give direction to some of the full committee's remaining interim activities. At this time, the following subcommittees and task forces have been formed for the upcoming interim. Number 1, the Subcommittee on Building Inspection. Number 2, the Subcommittee on Community Development Block Grants. And number 3, the Task Force on Cities. Here's a brief report on the activities of each of the 3 subcommittees. First, the Subcommittee on Building Inspection. House Concurrent Resolution 84 directed the Interim Joint Committee to study the building inspection process, including the training and certification process for building inspectors, the feasibility for the creation of a training incentive plan for building inspectors, and an evaluation of the testing procedures in the building inspector certification process. The Subcommittee on Building Inspection was formed in September and has met regularly since that time. Matter of fact, its last meeting was yesterday. During its first 3 meetings, the subcommittee heard testimony from representatives of the Department of Housing, Buildings, and Construction on the nature of building inspections and the department's role in administering and certifying the building inspections. It also heard testimony from the Code Administrators Association of Kentucky regarding general information relative to building inspectors and the processes they must go through in fulfilling their statutory duties. Several homeowners testified to the fact of suffering from substandard construction, which they felt could have been avoided if inspection of 1- and 2-family dwellings were enforced throughout the Commonwealth, instead of being optionally enforced by individual local governments. The subcommittee heard testimony from the Home Builders Association, the Kentucky League of Cities, and individual building inspectors in regard to the need for mandatory inspection of 1- and 2-family residences. The subcommittee also heard testimony from an official from Virginia's Department of Housing regarding their training program for their building officials, including information on the payment of dues for membership and these local inspectors in order to allow them additional support services for them. The idea of an official training academy was also discussed briefly. Finally, in December, the Code Administrators Association expressed their position regarding the recommendations of the subcommittee, and the Kentucky Judge Executive Association and KCO stated their position regarding the impact of including mandatory inspection of 1- and 2-family dwellings in the Kentucky Building Code. Representatives from the Insurance Services Office also had a brief presentation. The last item was for business for this subcommittee was the formation and adoption of the final report, which they did yesterday on January 9th. The report included 9 recommendations for the full committee, and all were adopted, which we will bring to you during the 1998 regular session. Number 2, the Subcommittee on Community Development Block Grants. Due to the late submission by the involved state agencies of the federal application for the Kentucky Small Cities Program, we formed a special subcommittee on community development block grants. Subcommittee did meet one time at this meeting, and they met with all the state, federal, and local officials, as well as representatives of special interest groups which participate in this grant process. Specifically, the members of the subcommittee were presented a presentation by the Department of Local Government, and they discussed the 1996 federal application. It was pointed out to the subcommittee that the major changes for this year's program was the inclusion of 2 new project areas, non-traditional economic development and micro-enterprise development. Finally, the subcommittee was told that both of these areas were being undertaken as one-year demonstration projects, with their future depending on the interest of applicants in these type of project areas. While several subcommittee members and various guests expressed their concerns regarding the reduction of funding for housing applications, the subcommittee did recommend the 1996 CDBG application is submitted to LRC for their final approval. Lastly, the task force on cities did not meet during the interim. We do expect them to meet later this winter or early this spring. That concludes my report, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Floyd.
I yield the gentleman from Ballard 1 to give the report of the State Government Committee.
Gentleman from Far West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Interim Joint Committee on State Government met once during the 1996-97 interim. At the interim meeting held on September 25th, the committee received a status report on Kentucky State Government's pilot personnel program from staff of 6 of the participating agencies and from the chair of the Personnel Steering Committee that oversees the program. The purpose of the 94 law authorizing pilot personnel programs is to identify new methods of quality management which should be adopted in state government. The law permits the temporary suspension of some state personnel laws in order to develop and test innovations in state government personnel policies and administration. The law directs the Personnel Steering Committee to consider several factors in approving a pilot program, including evidence of support by a majority of the employees who would participate in the proposed program. Among the committee's findings concerning the pilot personnel program, first, there are 1,736 state employees participating in 10 pilot projects. The personnel policies and issues affected by the current projects include employee evaluation, recruitment, job classification, revisions to re-engineer jobs and develop career paths, reduction in overtime and absenteeism, and adoption of federal standards for political activity by merit system employees. They also include surveys of participating employees that indicate positive views on the pilot projects. Also, agencies are developing objective measures of policy outcomes to address the effectiveness of the personnel system innovations. That's the report, Mr. Speaker. If there are any questions, I'll attempt to ask them. Otherwise, the report is submitted to this body. Thank you.
Gentleman from Floyd. Thank you, gentleman from Ballard.
Mr. Speaker, I yield the gentleman from Johnson 97 to give the report of the Transportation
Gentleman
Committee.
from the Far East now. Johnson 97.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of this honorable body. Before I start the report, I want to say that we had anticipated having an organizational meeting this afternoon, but we have extenuating circumstances. That meeting has been canceled. The committee has met 4 times since the adjournment of the regular session. At the close of this organizational session, there will be 3 subcommittees: vehicle regulation, commercial transportation, highways and traffic safety, and oversight of highway construction. Major topics of the committee that has been reviewed that came about during the 96 interim include highway construction project overruns according to the estimates on the 6-year road plan, federal grant for motor carriers, which having to do with Empower Kentucky initiative, which affected the Transportation Cabinet, and implementation of legislation enacted in 1996 relating to speed titles, the reduction of paperwork associated with the motor vehicle titling process, and graduated driver's licensing for teenagers. Pursuant to KRS 7.330, the committee held a hearing on Executive Order 96.916, reorganization of the Transportation Cabinet. The committee approved the executive order and report was made to the Legislative Research Commission. In performing the statutory legislative oversight responsibilities, the committee reviewed 9 administrative regulations under the process established by Chapter 13A. All 9 regulations were approved. None were found deficient. The regulations reviewed related to the collection of fuel tax having to do with the International Fuel Tax Agreement, billboards, truck weight limits, extended weight coal haul road systems, transporting hazardous material by air or by highway, proof of motor carrier liability and cargo insurance, the Medical Review Board and medical standards for drivers, and the pre-qualifications of contractors on the highway construction projects. This committee plans on being very active during the interim in the remaining months of this year. Lots of areas of concern will be discussed, and if any member has any concerns on any areas of concerning the whole state, if you would please give us an indication on that, we'll look at it and see possibly of discussing it during the interim. Mr. Speaker, that concludes the report on the Transportation Committee, and I move the acceptance of such.
Thank you, gentleman from Johnson 97. Gentleman from Floyd.
Mr. Speaker, that concludes the committee reports.
Gentleman from Floyd, we have a report. I haven't looked farther in my script. We have a report from the Long-Term Policy Board. Is that?
I don't have it.
We have a report from the Long-Term Policy Board. We have one of the constituents of the gentleman from Warren 20 here today, former Vice President at Western Kentucky University, Dr. Paul Cook. Dr. Cook, can you go right over there to Representative Allen's, the gentleman from Butler's microphone and make your report. This is Dr. Paul Cook. You can stand up or you can sit, however you want to do. However you want to do.
I'll do it however you want it.
Dr. Cook.
Am I on?
You're on. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the Board of Directors and the staff of the Long-Term Policy Research Center, I'm delighted to present our second biennial trends report, which is entitled Exploring the Frontier of the Future, with a subtitle, How Kentucky Will Live, Learn, and Work. We believe the report contains a lively and provocative discussion of issues and trends that will significantly affect Kentucky's future. In presenting this report to you, I thank you for the actions this body took in 1992 to create the Long-Term Policy Research Center. I also want to note the contributions members of this body are making to the Center Board. Representative Gippy Graham joined the board in 1996. Representative Steve Nunn has been on the board from the beginning, as has former Representative Ernesto Scorsone. 6 of the 21 members of the board come from the General Assembly, and this representation, along with representatives from the executive branch and 11 at-large members, provides a basis that should produce balanced consideration of issues. We're fortunate to have a small in number staff headed by Michael Childress, the executive director, and even though the staff is small in number, it's highly productive. I also want you to know of the gratitude we feel for the support provided by the staff of the Legislative Research Commission. This report is dedicated to the memory of Vic Heller Jr., our former colleague and friend. Much of the genesis for the center can be placed at Vic's doorstep, and the inauguration and early work of the center was made easier as a result of the guidance and support of Vic Heller. The report is the coordinated efforts of many people. Those who contributed to the volume are listed in the report, and the board is grateful to them and to the fine staff for this good piece of work. I encourage you to use it as a resource as you plan your work for the years to come. The mission of the Long-Term Policy Research Center is to serve as a catalyst to change the way decisions are made in government by providing policymakers a broader context in which to make decisions, taking into consideration the long-term implications of policy, critical trends, and emerging issues which may have a significant impact on the state. I believe this report fulfills this mission, and Mr. Speaker, I recommend it to you and the members of this body, and I appreciate this opportunity to make this report, and thank you, my representative.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cook. The next item of business is motions, petitions, and communications. The gentleman from Floyd.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, the Committee on Committees report, which will assign the committee membership, is being printed for distribution now. We do not have it now. We will have to wait until that report is.
They have a copy.
They have a copy. The members don't have copies on their desk, I understand.
Right.
You will have that very shortly, and so I would yield to any member, Mr. Speaker, who wishes to act upon a simple resolution or citation while we're awaiting distribution of the report.
Thank you. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Grant 61. For what purpose do you rise?
Mr. Speaker, for suspension of the rules, to introduce a guest.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I have with me today a young man from Dry Ridge who is a senior at Grant County High School. He's been very actively involved in the political process. He's been to Washington 3 times during the last year, and he's visiting with me here on the floor today. I think he has aspirations to be my successor, but I told him not to get in too big a hurry because I wasn't ready to leave yet.
I understand.
But I have with me today Wade Napier, who's a senior at Grant County, and just because his name is Napier now, I don't think he's any kin to Lonnie, so I'd like to introduce Wade Napier and ask you all to help make him welcome.
Would the Napier brothers please let us give them applause? Thank you, gentlemen from Grant.
Thank you, sir.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Franklin 57 arise?
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to request that the clerk would read legislative citation number 5.
Clerk, please report.
Legislative citation number 5 commends Mary Matney.
I'd like to move for its adoption.
Without objection. For what purpose does the gentleman from Bell 87 arise?
Mr. Speaker, I'd request that the clerk report legislative citation number 6 by title only.
Clerk, please report by title only.
Legislative citation number 6 honors Reverend W.B. Bingham II.
Gentleman from
Move
Bell.
for its adoption.
Without objection. Chair recognizes the, for what purpose does gentleman from Fayette 45 arise?
Mr. Speaker, are we in petitions and communications?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to communicate with the body.
Please communicate, sir. Looks like you have a doll there.
I just want to take an opportunity to introduce my oldest daughter. This is Meredith that's with me today, and as the gentleman from Jefferson said once, this is my son with whom I'm well pleased. Well, this is my daughter with whom I'm well pleased. She's a fine young lady, and I'd ask everyone to make her feel welcome this
Miss
morning.
Mary, we're glad to have you today. Would you wave to everybody?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. For what purpose does the lady from Fayette 76 arise?
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask the House Clerk to report citation 8 by title only.
Clerk, please report citation number 8 by title only.
Legislative citation number 8 is in loving memory of Raymond Sterling Lawrence.
Lady from Fayette.
Move adoption, please, Mr. Speaker.
Without objection.
And, Mr. Speaker, I have one more citation, please. Would
Please.
the clerk please report citation number 7?
Clerk, please report.
Legislative citation number 7 is in loving memory of Frank R. Dad Adams Sr.
Lady from Fayette.
Move adoption, please,
Without
Mr.
objection.
Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other members seeking recognition? For what purpose does the gentleman from Bell 87 arise?
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to communicate with the members of the House Judiciary Committee.
Please proceed, sir.
Members of the House Judiciary Committee, earlier we had announced a meeting today at 1 o'clock of the Interim Joint Judiciary Committee. Due to inclement weather and some not exactly knowing who our counterparts are in the Senate at this time, we're not going to have that organizational meeting today. I would ask that the members that have been appointed to the House Judiciary Committee, if they could meet shortly with us upon adjournment in the back of the chambers, right back here, okay? Thank you.
I see no other requests to speak, so at this point, we may sort of stand at ease unless someone wants to sing. The speaker does not want to sing. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Floyd.
Speaker, I move you, sir, that the rules be suspended for the purpose of allowing the clerk to report and read aloud the Committee on Committees report. And hopefully by the time that he's finished, we will have it before the body for distribution. But we'll at least, that'll put it for debate and discussion before the body.
Without objection. Gentleman from... For what purpose does the gentleman from Rockcastle 80 arise?
Rise to the point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Well, state your point, sir.
Mr. Speaker, we've just heard the gentleman from Floyd, the majority floor leader, announce that the clerk is going to read the Committee on Committees report.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Speaker, did the Committee on Committees actually meet?
Yes, they did.
Mr. Speaker, if they met, may I ask, was there a quorum at that meeting?
Yes, there was.
Mr. Speaker, were there minutes taken reflecting the actions of that committee?
Yes, there were.
Mr. Speaker, could we have a copy of those minutes?
You're going to have them read.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, according to Rule 45, it says those are to be filed with the clerk, which should be available to the members before they're read. Have they been filed with the clerk?
Stand at ease, please, sir. We'll have an answer.
Didn't even know they had a meeting.
Gentlemen from Rockcastle, first, there are two points that I'd like to make. First is that the chair would like to make. First is that the rules were suspended and they were done without objection. Secondly, on Rule 45, there is no, the only thing that the chair is able to find is that the chairman shall keep a record of the attendance of members. And there was a careful record of the attendance. Gentleman from Rockcastle.
Mr. Speaker, I think if we read that rule, it says, which shall be filed with the clerk. Shall be. I understand shall.
What line is that on, gentleman from?
Give me a moment to find that. On page 41, the second paragraph from the bottom. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to say to the members of this body, this is a very important issue. I know that we all want to do what's right here, and I just ask you, if you would, to follow along in your rule book on page 41. It says the chairman shall keep a record of the attendance of members at the meeting, which record shall be filed with the clerk.
Point of order, gentleman from Henderson 11.
Mr. Speaker, you cleared the whole thing up when you made the first statement that you yielded to the gentleman from Floyd. It was moved to suspend the rules to have this report read. When you did that without objection, I don't give a hoot what the rest of that rule said. It's suspended. You read the report. And this is just wee-weeing upstream.
Well, of course that's true. The other thing is, this only refers, gentleman from Rockcastle, this only refers, that record, to standing committees. It does not refer to committee.
Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Rockcastle.
As I understood the motion it was made to suspend the rules for the purpose of the clerk reading the Committee on Committees report, not for any other purpose. Now, if we're going to have rules, then we ought to operate by those rules.
And the report of the attendance is filed with the clerk. It is properly filed with the clerk.
May we have a copy of that?
You certainly may. It's right here. Please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, according to Rule 39 of the House rules, and of course I guess by suspending the rules according to what you're interpreting is, we've just thrown out the rule book and done whatever we so desire. Now, my understanding was that the suspension of the rules was for reading of the Committee on Committees report. But Rule 39 specifically states that the number of members to be assigned to each committee is to be announced on the House floor prior to the Committee on Committee making its report. Mr. Speaker, may I ask you, was that ever done?
Again, sir, that refers to standing committees and not the Committee on Committees. However, that report has also been filed with the clerk. Trying to double check, trying to double do all of these things.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One follow-up, Mr. Speaker.
Feel free, sir.
I understand that we're getting ready to read the Committee on Committee reports. As the minority floor leader, Mr. Speaker, I would like to know that if we suspended the rules again, or does the minority party have its equal representation on each committee as is set out by our rules?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So far as I know, that was very carefully adhered to.
Mr. Speaker?
Yes, sir, gentleman from Rockcastle 80.
I'd just like to comment for just a moment if I could.
Please comment. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, the rules of the House are the rules that we all have agreed to live by. These are rules that protect us all, not just the minority members, but all the members. Yet on this very important matter, the assigning of committee seats. These rules have been violated with impunity. Mr. Speaker, I would like to rise to the point of personal privilege.
Has the gentleman been aggrieved? If he has, state his
Mr.
grievance.
Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, I rise today very aggrieved over the actions demonstrated by the leadership of the General Assembly. Each of you have a copy of a legislative record. You'll notice in that legislative record is a list of each of the committees of this body. You'll notice when you look at those committees that there is a committee on committees. When you read those names of the committee on committees, you'll find the name of the chair, the gentleman from Jefferson 46, the gentleman from Floyd, the gentleman from Campbell 67, the gentleman from Woodford as a member of leadership is to serve on that committee, and myself, the gentleman from Rockcastle. I'm here to submit to this body today that as a member of the Committee on Committees, I was never informed of any meeting or asked to attend any meeting of the Committee on Committees. I asked for information on the Committee on Committees, and it was denied me. I wasn't even allowed in the room. I asked for a list of the members' Rule 39 committees and was told I couldn't get it. Is this open government? When a member of this body is denied information to make an informative decision or to draft their own legislation or report? They say they're for open meetings, but their actions speak louder, so loud that you can't hear the words. The sad fact is that a cloak of secrecy has descended over the Commonwealth just as the snow clouds have darkened the winter sky. Many Kentuckians, no doubt, on Wednesday, January the 8th, picked up one of their two statewide newspapers and read in that statewide newspaper that business in Frankfort had changed. The Lexington Herald-Leader reported that this was hailed as a victory for open government. A member of leadership was quoted as saying that he wrote the new rule on opening the caucus and pushed it because it was time to end the mistaken belief that Democrats were cutting deals in private. We don't do anything behind those closed doors that we shouldn't do in private, he said, and continued. There weren't any secret deals cut. That was all just an illusion. And I thought it was time to dispel that illusion, end quote. Was it really an illusion? Or was the committee assignment process an illustration of what takes place? Yes, I commend the Democrat caucus for stepping forward and following our example of opening their process to discuss the people's business. Now, just 2 short days later, 48 hours, they find the majority of leadership has violated the rules and the process of this body. It's apparent that the leadership of the House is not aware of the changes that have been made this week in the Kentucky State Senate. Yes, the majority party, through the courage of its members, took the right step in opening its caucus. And I would encourage that you request that the entire process be open and that the business of this state be conducted in the light of day. This committee not only decided to resort to old political process, but failed to honor the request made by the minority party on committee assignments. Why are these assignments important? Why are they important to this Commonwealth? I think all of these committee assignments are important to reflect the minority's views as well as the entire populace of this state. Mr. Speaker, we have taught and demonstrated that bipartisanship is by far the best approach to resolving the issues that we face. We have experience of what can be accomplished with cooperation. The House passed a health care measure with 69 bipartisan votes, a health care measure that it would have reduced health care costs and would have brought competition into the marketplace and would have created better services through a competitive market. The Senate Democrat leadership ignored our plea to bring relief to the citizens of Kentucky, and therefore we're finding far more Kentuckians today who are unable to obtain and keep quality health care. You've all heard the stories. You have constituents who are suffering from the dilemma that has been placed upon them because of an unacceptable health care reform. We could have passed this legislation if we had used the same spirit of bipartisanship that was demonstrated with the workers' compensation bill. Bipartisanship worked with workers' compensation reform. It could have worked with health care, and we should let it work today in this all-important task of assigning committee seats. Winston Churchill once said, "Character is what you do in the dark when no one is looking." I would submit to you that we show character in government when we don't operate or do operate in the cover of darkness. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
What purpose does the gentleman from Letcher 91 arise? No? Okay, all right. What purpose does the lady from Campbell 68 arise?
Point of order, sir.
State your point, ma'am.
And perhaps this is a point that can best be clarified by our floor leader, if the man from Floyd will please yield to a question or two.
Gentleman from Floyd, will you yield a couple of questions? He will yield. Lady from Campbell 68.
Sir, because of your superior position in this body and your years of expertise, I ask you these questions. regarding the report filed by the Committee on Committees. The handwriting is somewhat familiar, sir. I was wondering if you could tell me who prepared the report, when they prepared the report, when it was filed, and why there are no Republicans present on that meeting.
Lady from Campbell, I'd be happy to explain to you and the rest of the body, if they care to listen, exactly what happened over the past few days. And, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to take issue with the gentleman's version of the facts. What actually happens, if you read the rules, is that the Committee on Committees is composed of the Speaker pro tem, Majority Floor Leader, Majority Caucus Chairman, Majority Whip, and the Minority Floor Leader. Now, to the best of my recollection, beginning on Wednesday afternoon following adjournment of this body, at which time those officers were clearly established and accepted by the body, in the Speaker's office, the Speaker, as Chairman, called a meeting of the Committee on Committees. And as far as I know, and I wasn't present all the time, the gentleman from Rockcastle never once appeared in the Speaker's office. If you look at the report, yeah, I wrote it out. It's an attendance report. I don't think we kept that, and I filed it with the clerk, and it shows who was present. As far as I know, the gentleman wasn't barred from the meeting. As far as I know, I didn't see any guards at the door. And as far as I know, the only input that the gentleman had was there was some kind of a note sent over, as I recall, or a sheet of paper that showed what the gentleman and his, I suppose, other members of leadership had thought were proper committee assignments for the members of the minority party. And when we looked at that sheet and we looked at the rules, we determined that they hadn't acted in compliance with the rules, because the rule says, Rule 39 says, that in appointing the membership of standing committees, the Committee on Committees shall consider the predominant business interest or occupation of each member, so that the private interests of the majority of the committee's members do not correspond to the jurisdiction of the standing committee. And we got to collectively sitting there and looking at those appointments, not to criticize them, but to critique them. And it was our impression in a number of instances, and you have to forgive us because we weren't privy to whatever private meetings that they were having behind closed doors and how they arrived at that conclusion, or why they in some instances appeared to want to punish certain members of their own party with committee reports. And we took a vote, Mr. Speaker, as I recall, and we went through member by member. And in many instances, we felt like that the appointments as recommended were correct. But in a few instances, we felt like that there was some punitive nature to the appointments, that members of this body had been overlooked. Now, I want to make it clear, not a member of the minority party that I know of ever requested anything different by calling and talking to any of us. So if you're a member of the minority party and you find yourself on a committee that you don't know how you got there, we'll take the blame for it. And as always, if you're not satisfied and you want to change with somebody and they agree to it, we'll try to accommodate you. We've always done that. Now, that is what happened. The report you have before you today is in compliance with the rules. It was done in open. I can't help it that the gentleman from Rockcastle wasn't there. I never, in fact, saw his list, but I was told that it came over. Now, it's up to this body to adopt that report. The Committee on Committees is just a recommending body. If for some reason a majority of the members on this floor feel like that report is not in compliance with the rules or not fair, then they can reject it and we'll go back to the drawing board. But I can tell you, as far as I know, there was an oversight on the attendance sheet. And I wrote an attendance sheet out, showed it to the Speaker, and filed it with the clerk. I believe that complies with the rule. If by inadvertence we have overlooked another rule, Mr. Speaker, if the gentleman will call it to our attention, we'll be happy to comply with it. But the fact of the matter is, we can't compel the gentleman from Rockcastle to come to the meetings. All we can do is open the door. And the door was opened. And the meetings were held. And people walked in and out of the room freely. And there wasn't anything secretive or somewhat not proper that occurred. It was simply a meeting of a majority of the members of the Committee on Committees trying to make a report to present to this body. It's as simple as 1, 2, 3.
Lady from Campbell, do you have another question of the gentleman?
Yes, sir, I do.
We may be here a while. His answers are not too succinct.
But always enlightening. If the
Please proceed,
the
lady.
gentleman from Floyd will please yield to another question or two.
He'll yield.
Forgive me, sir. Perhaps I was not listening closely enough, but I failed to hear when that report was prepared and when it was filed.
The lady may not be aware of the fact that the rule doesn't require a time limit for the filing of the report. It simply says that the report is to be filed. Now, technically, when I moved to suspend the rules, arguably, as the gentleman from Henderson pointed out, the report was not even necessary, the attendance report. But we didn't want to make any type of indiscretion, and I appreciate the gentleman from Rockcastle's pointing out that oversight, and so we prepared that report and filed it with the clerk in compliance with the rule. There is no time requirement as to when that report was to be filed. It was filed when the gentleman pointed out so graciously to us that we had inadvertently overlooked it.
Lady from Campbell.
Sir, perhaps the volume needs to be turned up on my honored and esteemed colleague's microphone. But again, forgive me, sir, but I failed to hear the answer to that question as to when
It was. He answered it completely. I think. I don't know why you would have any problem, ma'am.
I'm sorry, sir. Will you please yield again? Thank you.
Gentleman from Floyd, this may be harassment to keep you having to answer those questions when you've answered them so completely, but if you care to answer them again, please feel free.
I'd be more than happy to answer those questions, Mr. Speaker.
And perhaps I should add another question now. Again, sir, can you
Lady
tell
from
me...
Campbell, ask your question.
Thank you. Can you tell me, in terms of time, and specific to time as recorded on the clock and calendar, when that report was filed? And also another thought occurred to me. I don't see a signature by the chairman. Is that required? And if it's missing, does that invalidate the report, sir?
Gentleman from Floyd.
Mr. Speaker, I may have to read aloud the rule to the lady so that she can comprehend it. The rule simply requires for the filing of the report. It is an attendance report. It simply states who was present at the meeting of the Committee on Committees. If the rule requires anything other than that, I don't read it in the rule. If the lady would point out to me where there's a time requirement or a signature requirement or any other requirement, I would hope that we could immediately take care of that tremendous oversight and not burden the lady's conscience any further. I certainly want that report to be as succinct and complete and concise as it could possibly have been, Mr. Speaker. It took me all of about 28 seconds to prepare the darn thing. It read that on January the 8th and 9th, the Committee on Committees met and the following members were present, and I wrote their names out. Now, if that doesn't comply with the rule, if the rule requires something other than that, I'll try to take another 28 seconds and prepare another report, if that will help the ladies' feelings about this whole matter.
Has the lady been prompted with some other questions? Lady from Campbell. Lady from Campbell, state your further questions with whom you've had some aid and help.
We must always use every opportunity to enlighten ourselves
Certainly,
and to learn
certainly.
from every
You're
experience.
exactly correct.
And I'm always anxious for that opportunity.
Yes, ma'am. Lady
I
from
guess
Campbell, ask your question, please.
if the gentleman from Floyd will please yield again.
He will yield to another question.
Gentlemen, you mentioned that you filled out the report, sir. Are you the chairman of that?
The speaker is the chairman, and that the rule requires that the report simply be filed. The speaker was shown the report, approved it, and it was filed at his direction. I simply played the role of a secretary and happened to write it out.
Lady from Campbell.
Thank you, sir. This has been most enlightening.
It certainly has. Thank you. For what purpose, gentleman from Rockcastle Lady, arise? I'm sorry.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for the point of clarification.
Point of clarification.
To this body.
Please state your point.
Ladies and gentlemen of this House, I want to ask you today to put yourself in the position of the members of the minority party. I want to ask you, when you do something that is not in favor of the leadership, what are you going to do? Are you going to let someone control everything that you do on this House floor? If you do, you ought to go home. Vote your conscience and what you think's right and how you think that things ought to happen. This has been made a joke today. A joke! It's not a joke. The majority floor leader stood up and talked about how I didn't come into the committee. Let me ask every one of you, anyone here that's ever served on a committee and those that will serve in the future, let me ask you this. Do you think that when there's a committee meeting you won't be notified of it? Absolutely you'll be notified. You'll be notified unless you're in the same position that we are, unless there's something that they want to see passed and they don't want anybody that'll object to it. That's the only time you won't be notified. It's time that we stop playing games in this House of Representatives and we look for what's right. I promised myself I wouldn't get this way today. But there's a time of conviction. And there's a time when you don't stand up and speak for what's right. Take all my committees. There's nothing here that I'm willing to sell my soul for. And let me say to you, the Committee on Committees is the same as any other committee in this body. And if we don't respect it, or if we don't respect any of these committees, folks, if we just play games to satisfy a few in the majority, we're not doing what ought to be done. When the majority floor leader stands and talks about me not wandering in to the Speaker's office, I think he'll tell you that I called him.
Senator Karen?
I talked to him and asked him what was going on. Could he tell me what I need to do? I went and talked to you, did I, Mr. Speaker? I come and talked to you.
Mr. Kelly?
I asked you what was going to take place. I asked you when it was going to take place. I asked you where it was going to take place. And all I could get was, my leadership is very upset with you.
Quorum present. Quorum being present, the first
That's
order of
not the way
business is
this
unfinished business.
General
Recognize
Assembly
the
should be
Senator from
operated.
Washington.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I would like
We ought to
to
do
resolve the
things
issue of vice
because
chairman
of
for
what's
various
right for the
committees,
state,
and I will
not
tender to
because
the
of
clerk a document
personalities.
setting these out, but for the benefit If everybody
I
else
kept
has
waiting
natural
for a phone
resource,
call.
The Vice Chair will be Ernie Harris.
I just knew that somebody would call me.
Economic Development and Labor, the Vice Chair will be Senator
Somebody
Richard
call
Sanders.
me and say, we're going to
Appropriation
meet.
and Revenues, the
Because
Vice Chair will be
I understand the
Senator Charlie
process.
Borders. In the case of
I
education,
know how this
the Co-Chair
process
will
works.
be Senator Lindy Caspear.
It's worked this way for
Banking and
years.
Insurance, the Vice Chair will be Senator Tom Buford.
This isn't
Health and
anything new.
Welfare, the Vice Chair will be Senator Julie Rose. Judiciary, the Vice
It's
Chair
worked
will
this
be
way for
Senator
years.
Tim Philpott.
There's a few that go behind closed
Vice Chair will be
doors
Senator Virgil Moore.
and make those
Licensing and
assignments.
Occupations, Vice Chair will be
And
Senator
do the
Eric
people's
Metcalf.
business.
State and local government, the Vice Chair shall
Folks,
be Senator Albert Robinson, and I would move.
I'm just
that
asking you
these
this.
individuals be appointed as.
I'm just asking you this.
Second.
When there's an issue comes up,
All
when
in
there's an
favor?
issue comes up,
Aye. One other.
and your conscience is involved with that issue, and your conscience differs from what somebody else might say, where are you going to be? Is it committee assignment? Is it chairmanship going to put you in a position of sacrificing what you believe in? I don't think there's a member up here, I don't think there's a member in this body that wants to do that. But when we stand on this House floor and there's a situation like this situation here today, when the rules have been violated and all we do is stand up and we suspend the rules, we suspend the rules. We suspend the rules for particular purposes. We don't suspend the entire rules, but that's what you're made to believe. That's what you're made to think. Most of the older members here know me. I've been around here a little while. And you know I'll get emotional from time to time. I get upset. But I do speak my conscience. And I don't have fault with any member in here. Not in any member of leadership. Not with the speaker. Not with the floor leader. Not with anybody. I don't want to have fault with those people. I want to consider them my friend. And I do consider them my friend. But ladies and gentlemen, when we stand on this House floor and we make a mockery of this system, when we do what has been done here today and tell about the gentleman from Rockcastle and how he wouldn't even come into the Speaker's office, we can start across this aisle with a member that's been here for a while. Excuse me, son. With the members that's been here for a while. I don't care whether they're Democrat or Republican. I challenge you to find one time that I told you wrong, that I lied to you. I won't do it. And I also challenge you to do this. Search your own heart. Is this what we want in government? I've already talked about the issues. You know, when we want a bipartisan effort, you know, when this House wants a bipartisan effort, when the majority leadership wants a bipartisan effort, when they need us. When they need us. And if we're not needed, what happens to us is the things that are happening right here today. And let me say this to you. There's not a member of the minority caucus that I'd be concerned about serving on any committee in this House. Those members that have been replaced by other members, they're every one capable. They'll every one do the job as it should be done. But I don't believe there's a Democrat in this House or a Republican alike that honestly in their heart feel that this is the way we ought to be operating our government. Thank you.
For what purpose, gentleman from Lecture 91 arise?
Point of order.
State your point, sir.
I believe, Mr. Speaker, that you ruled on this issue some time back.
I did, sir.
And I believe that the proper decorum is that the ruling stands or the chair is challenged,
right,
rather than confrontational discourse.
Thank you. For what purpose does the gentleman from Boone 66 arise?
Point of personal privilege.
Has the gentleman been agreed?
Yes, sir, I have.
State your grievance, sir.
I would like to start out, Mr. Speaker, saying this, that the comments I make today are not directed at anyone personally. I'm not here to personally attack or to personally make myself to appear more righteous than someone else. But I think all of us know why we're standing here on the floor today asking questions and having difference of opinions. Personally, I've been put into a position of feeling sad and sorrowful as the minority floor leader was speaking. Rude remarks were made. Laughing and giggling was made and occurred. That I don't think affects anyone except the people who do those things. You need to look yourself in the mirror. If you or I choose to act a fool, then that's what we are. And that's what I am if I do those things. And I've been guilty of doing those things. There are many times that I have to look people in the face and apologize to them for being foolish. But I'm very concerned. I'm going to begin my third term down here, and you know, the process is what government is all about. And the process by which we conduct government is very important. I believe that one of the foundations for democracy in this country has been violated over the last 2 days. I believe back in the late 1700s, a statement was made by a famous statesman. He said, I may not agree with what you say, but I'll defend to my death your right to say it. And we had several things occur here on Wednesday, I believe, that made us all feel uncomfortable. From my perspective, I did not see it as a personal attack on anyone. I want to give two illustrations that both occurred on Wednesday. We had one of our members stand up and voice his opinion on workers' compensation. And in voicing his opinion, he personally attacked the governor of this great commonwealth of ours. I heard comments such as the governor was a hypocrite, the governor was a liar, the governor was doing this for personal gain. And yet, I did not see one person on this floor stand up to defend our governor, whether we agree or disagree with him on certain issues. And yet, 72 members of this body voted to support the governor on workers' compensation. So I kind of wondered as I listened to this debate or these comments, was he just directing those at the governor, or was he directing those at everyone who supported that piece of legislation? Another situation occurred that I think caught us all by surprise, where one of our members stood up and nominated himself for a leadership position. And this is where I believe that a very important foundation of democracy was violated. I believe that some of our people took this as a personal attack on this member who was nominated by the body and the vote that occurred. I'm not the one to judge whether it was or it wasn't. I think we all have a perception as to how they feel about that. But we took and we allowed ourselves to make one issue destroy a working relationship that we have tried to develop over the last 2 years, I feel like. And sometimes it is the person that is offended. It is that person's reaction to a situation that can make a situation either a divisive or a bonding situation. I have prayed for 2 days about whether or not I should make comments. You know, someone said, it's not your fight, stay out of it. But I don't think this is a fight. I believe this is a responsibility to all of us to look at what we are down here to do. And today, we have not done what we are down here to do. Now, I don't think there's any stupid people on this floor. And I think everybody sitting in their chairs know why the Committee on Committees did what they did. And if they don't, see me later and I'll explain it to you, or see anyone else. But I'm personally disappointed that we can't be bigger than the situation that has arisen. I personally want to apologize to the gentleman from Jefferson 46 because I too, like many people, was had a very uneasy feeling about the situation that occurred here. I don't feel like it's my responsibility to belittle someone because they have a different view of the political process than I do. But I do feel like I have the right to voice my opinion, and that I should not be threatened, that I should not be punished. Because you know what happens when you think that you're punishing someone for doing something that you don't agree with? You're actually destroying your own freedoms. You are destroying your own freedoms. Let me share something with you. I went home that night and I got my history book out and I read about Patrick Henry. You know what? Some of the people, and the majority of the people, when Patrick Henry stood up and said, "Give me liberty or give me death," thought he was a radical, thought he was a weirdo. Most of the people did not agree with him, but he was standing up for what he thought to be a better form of government for everyone involved in that legislative body. Now, I don't know that my speech is going to make any difference. You know, you all may go and you may do your giggling, and that's fine. But I will tell you this. It does affect many of us. And when we look to people for leadership and we see the shenanigans that go on, it doesn't say anything about the direction that the Commonwealth of Kentucky is heading in. It says the opposite. My desires, or personally, my wish for all of us would be that we can be big enough to apologize to each other when we wrong each other, to stand up and know when we have done foolish things. That is when we're going to start doing the people's business in a lot better way. And all I can say is, you know, I stand here and I hear people say, well, you're my friend and you're my friend. Well, I'm going to tell you something. Friends are people who respect each other, and they don't stand up and manipulate and misrepresent. So if we truly are friends, we're going to respect each other's opinions, and we're going to respect that we are going to have those differences. And I would encourage us all to take a look at the actions that we have observed today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
What purpose, gentlemen, from Jefferson 35 arise? Jefferson 35? Did you? Okay. I thought your button was on. Excuse me. For what purpose does the lady from McCracken 4 arise? Lady from McCracken 4 is Didn't want to speak? All right. Blaze McCracken, you did not want to speak? Okay. Gentlemen, for what purpose, gentlemen from Fayette 45 arise?
Mr. Speaker, I've been aggrieved.
State your grievance, sir.
Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of this honorable body. Sit down, man. I've got to talk. Got to do the people's business. In the questioning that has occurred on the floor in connection with the Committee on Committees report, I think there's a record which needs to be set straight and needs to be corrected. When we convened on the floor today, we inquired, colleague Jennifer Davies inquired as clerk of the House, if the report from the chairman of the Committee on Committees had been filed with the clerk of this House in conformity with House rules, and was informed at that time that there was no such report. So when that point of order was raised to this body, someone other than the chairman, and I believe it was the gentleman who refused to answer the questions when he was asked them a few moments ago, wrote out a few names on a piece of paper and handed it to the clerk. And I've had a page bring me that copy, and noted that the members of the minority party were not listed as ever being present at the two meetings that were allegedly called of the Committee on Committees. And I would also note that that report is unsigned. The rule requires, contrary to what the gentleman responded to, that the report be prepared and kept by the chairman. And I would think the chairman would at least have the responsibility and sense of duty to sign his own report. So as the gentleman from Rockcastle pointed out previously, what is happening here today is making a mockery of the process, a mockery of the people's business. What is at issue is a fundamental premise of how government operates. A fundamental premise is being challenged. And I say that to point out that we have a set of rules of the House. Y'all have a copy on your desk probably. It looks like this. These rules, just like Robert's Rules of Order or Mason's Manual, ensure fairness in debate. They ensure openness. They're supposed to assure truthfulness. Fairness. The people of the Commonwealth, if they demand nothing else from us, have a right to demand and expect fairness. An opportunity to be heard, to present your story, your side of the case. That's what these rules that we adopt every time we convene are intended to assure. Fairness. Not so much fairness from us or by us toward one another, but we're a republic form of government. Indirectly is to assure fairness to the people who sent us here to do their business. Now, with that having been said, every time there comes a question of fairness on this floor to test the rules, what do? Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules. We suspend them. We suspend the guardians of fairness without objection. And we do it over and over and over again. We do it without a thought. The most fundamental premise of our system of governing, we suspend without a second thought. Now, we're acting on one of the most important matters that we're convened to act upon in this organizational session, and that's the assignment of committees. Because in many respects, those of you who've been here a few years recognize the importance of the substantive actions that this body takes through the committee process in the interim and during the regular session. So consequently, the actions we take here today will have a tremendous impact on the course this vessel of public policy is on. But yet what do? We ignore fairness and suspend the rules without a thought. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, I'm also aggrieved by some remarks in connection with how the Committee on Committees conducted its business. And try as I might, I try not to let things down here become personal. I try to make my decisions, as most of you do as well, based upon the objectiveness of the situation. But sometimes you have friends that you're more loyal to, that you've been through more things with. And there was an implication in a gentleman's remark on this floor that my floor leader had somehow abrogated his responsibility in failing to attend the Committee on Committees meeting. That he ignored his duty to attend those meetings. And it was said with a wink and a smile, like it was cute. The suggestion that the gentleman from Rockcastle would ignore any duty he has to his fellow members of this body, in the minority caucus, and most importantly, his constituents back home is wrong and a lie. It's a lie. And I take exception to the suggestion that the gentleman from Rockcastle abrogated his responsibilities. I know for a fact the gentleman from Rockcastle sat by the phone hour after hour after hour waiting for that telephone call from the chairman of the Committee on Committees so that he could attend and assure compliance with Rule 39 and the other applicable rules. The call never came. My mother taught me a lot of things when I was growing up, as your alls probably did as well, if you're fortunate enough to have one like I did. But one of the things that stuck with me the longest of all the lessons is that we're going to be judged by our actions and not by our words. This week we saw the majority party open its caucus in response to pressure from the editorial writers of the state's two major newspapers. But I think they elected to do the right thing, to do the people's business in the light of day and in public. And I shared the excitement of a new day, what I thought was a new day having arrived in our state's capital. But I thought for a change that the people's business was going to be done in public. But what I have discerned from the debate today is that that was nothing more than a symbolic gesture, because the actions of the majority are speaking so loud that you can't hear a word that they're saying. Because when the rubber hits the road and it comes time to act substantively on the people's business and to honor the fundamental tenets of fairness as set out by the rules that we all adopt, the majority goes behind closed doors and closes out the voices of the minority. I'm here to tell you the minority party represents people too, people who pay taxes, people who have an interest in how government is conducted and how their business is seen to. Actions are speaking so loud you can't hear a word you're saying. So I'm sad in that regard today. And I'm going to close with this. It's a story that I think is more fitting than any other I can think of at the moment. Shortly after the United States found itself embroiled in World War II after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Mr. Speaker, may I have some order? Mr. Speaker, may I have some order? Thank you.
Sounds pretty quiet to me.
quite after I asked for it. Thank you.
Seems very
Shortly after the United States found itself embroiled in the Great World War II, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, there were 2 United States battleships at sea in the South Pacific, and they were on sparring maneuvers with one another, honing and sharpening their skills for what each of them knew, each of the crews knew would be the inevitable engaging with the enemy. So they practiced day in and day out, sparring with one another. But early one morning, just before the sun shone on the horizon of the South Pacific, the captain and the first mate were standing on the bridge of one of those United States battleships. And the first mate was there. You can just see him with his big binoculars, and he was staring out over the horizon. And the sun had not yet shone yet, and he punches the captain. He says, Captain, I see a light on the horizon, and we're on a course for it. The captain says, don't worry, and he picks up the microphone to his radio. He says, attention, alter your course, 20 degrees starboard. And he releases, and there's a moment of silence. And a reply comes back over the radio and says simply, alter your course, 20 degrees starboard. The captain was kind of taken by that, and he picks up his microphone again, and he squeezes the microphone, and he says, this is a United States battleship. Alter your course, 20 degrees starboard. There's a moment of silence, and all the while, the distance between the light on the horizon and the battleship was closing. A moment later, a reply comes back over the radio, and it says, alter your course, 20 degrees starboard. Well, the captain was quite taken by that, and all the while the distance was closing. They were coming closer and closer to one another, and the captain picks up his radio microphone for the 3rd time. He says, this is the captain of a United States battleship. Prepare to be fired upon, or alter your course, 20 degrees starboard. The pause was a little longer this time, and the two were nearing a collision. Finally, a reply comes back over the radio. It says, Captain, this is a lighthouse. Alter your course, 20 degrees starboard. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, when we ignore the fundamental tenets of fairness embodied by these rules, as we have and are doing today, the vessel of the public policy making branch of government is on a collision course with the very people we are here to serve. We are on a collision course with those beacons, those bedrock set of values. And believe you me, the people back home, the lighthouses, the beacons, know what fairness means. And they can recognize when this body is on a collision course with those values. I ask you to seriously consider the action we're about to take today and honor the tenets of fundamental fairness. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and ladies and gentlemen.
Are there other members seeking recognition? For what purpose the gentleman from Franklin 57 arise?
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a few comments.
Please proceed, sir.
I sit here today and have an uneasy feeling. And intuitively, I believe there's probably other people here today that may have similar feelings. Now, most of you know I represent Franklin County, the city of Frankfort, the seat of state government. And I take this very seriously. The young people who sit at the front, the pages, many are constituents of mine. And I'm concerned and very sensitive about what the youth hear and observe here in the General Assembly. I once was a teacher in public schools. I've taught civics, and I taught government. We taught it as I had been taught at Elkhorn High School by a lady that well revered in this county. We have a school named after her, Little Hearn. She was my teacher in civics. And we did talk about how things are done by the book. It's very important to understand those things. Since that time, and going on through my adult life, I have learned that the things I tried to teach my class in high school at Georgetown and in Boyle County, that when you get into the real world, things aren't exactly like that. But yet, I think that this term fairness, I don't know where you break it out. What is fair, what really isn't fair. But I don't feel good because I don't like devious behavior. Now, I want to tell you, it's a little story. I think it's humorous. You may or may not. But I picked up after I got through all my education was about working in community. I've had a lot of work in my life, about 18 years, working in communities, trying to bring local school districts to work in cooperation with all agencies and aspects of the community. County government, city government, libraries, extension service, all the people who do things together. And I know that this thing of the ins and the outs. When the ins are in, the in won't stay in. When the outs are out, they want to get in. I mean, that's just basic. I think we understand that. You have the ins and the ends. You know, the outs get in, they become the ins, and the behavior becomes very similar to what they're critical of before they became in. There were twin skunks. One was named in, and one was named out. Now, they were never together. Whenever in was in, out was out. When out was out, in was in, the opposite. They could never stay together. So one day at lunchtime, Mama Skunk told out, who happened to be in at the time, in was out. She said, out, go out and find in. Bring him in for lunch. So out went out to find in and found him very quickly and brought in. And she said, out, you're a good little skunk. How did you find in so quickly? And out said it was easy. In stinks. So I know that feeling prevails a lot in what we do. Now, I also have had a coaching background, coaching experience. And I've been beaten badly. I've been full court press, and where I couldn't get the ball across the center line. I've been beaten almost 70 points one time. I mean, not many people have done that and kept their job. But I've been full court press. And I coached a small college team one time that we didn't have our own gym, so we played a lot of games in other states. We go to Florida, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, and play on the road. Sometimes we'd have officials there. They were local high school officials. There was no way we were going to win that game, regardless of how we played. So what I guess I'm saying here today is I can see both sides of this. I know the realities of life. But I would hope that even though I was outmanned as a coach on many occasions and was full court pressed, yet I want the person who's blowing the whistle to call them the way they're supposed to be. And so I hope, as we go into this biennium, that if we are being devious, we're not being upfront, I hope we will become more open and more honest. If that's the case, I don't know what the situation was. I came here today not really knowing, but I've just heard this discussion and I've just felt compelled to express my feelings. Thank you.
What purpose, gentleman from Woodford 56 arise?
Mr. Speaker, rise to a point of personal privilege.
Gentleman been aggrieved?
Not a whole lot, but a little bit. And
State your little bit of grievance.
Really also to communicate with the gentleman from Franklin, who I respect a lot, and we share the same legislative, not the same district, but we share part of Franklin County. And so I want to communicate to him on the question that he's raised about fairness, and also to make some remarks regarding the process. Now, I recently stepped into that process, and it was my first time, and if it was different or changed or somehow not fair, then maybe I'm at fault, and you ought to direct all your comments, gentlemen from Rockcastle or gentlemen from Fayette 45, at me, and because at least on our side of things, I was the only change that was in leadership, and maybe that's my fault. But let me give you some ideas of some of the thinking that went into what I saw as some of the decisions that got made. First of all, I thought what we operated on was the most important fairness principle, and that was fairness to individual members of this body as best we could. Now, the gentleman from Rockcastle had input, maybe because of his experience, maybe even more input than I had. What I saw when we were having a meeting was a sheet that he sent up that had what he suggested were committee preference assignments for members of the minority party. In fact, I ended up seeing more than one of those sheets, so he was involved at least by having that sort of input. And I assume that input was done by some collective process within their party, and thought, well, that's good. We ought to take that into consideration, and believe we did. But one of the things we then did was looked at what the individual members of the minority party had signed up for and put on as their preferences, just like all other 99 members of the House do. And what we were trying to do, and particularly with new members, was to give them as many of the preferences as possible, trying to give them at least 2 out of the 3 of the top preferences that they put down in their committee preference assignment. And as we started comparing the information that the gentleman from Rockcastle provided against the preference sheets that the individual members had submitted, we found a great deal of discrepancy. The only conclusion I could draw from that was that perhaps the leadership in the minority party had tried to substitute their judgment, and I presume behind closed doors also, and try to direct how their members ought to go. Now, I don't know if that happened or not, but I, though new in leadership, am not new to the process, and I just assumed that probably meant that's what they did. So what we did was to try to go back and look at what individual members wanted and asked for, and tried to accommodate them as best as we could. And I believe we did that. If you look at the preference sheets, compare them with what individual members of majority and minority party had asked for, I think we've come close to doing as best we could of giving some preferences as they requested. Now, had we taken entirely the gentleman from Rockcastle's preference sheet that he prepared and submitted to us, I will tell you that would have been a wonderful thing for him, but he would have gotten everything he asked for. I will tell you, I was in the room myself asking and pleading the case for committee assignments for members that were in my general regional area, and I'll tell you, I got beat up on occasions. And so the fairness that they talk about, I will tell you, is not unfair in that the process, there's give and take all around. I had several committee assignments that I thought individual members would be good at, and when they were put into the mix, it didn't come out that way. And those members may feel that that was not fair, or they didn't get what they wanted, but that's what happened. It's not, I said, if he'd gotten everything that he'd sent up, why, he'd certainly got a whole lot more than I had as I was sitting there arguing, pleading my case for individual members too. And so I think they have overstated the case, to say the least, gentlemen from Franklin. in that, in my experience in several years in the legislature about the give and take that has to go into any decision-making process, I certainly felt like that process was fair. And I certainly didn't get in pleading cases for people that I thought would make good committee assignments. I certainly didn't get everything I asked for, and nobody ever does when they leave here in that process. But on the question of was it fair, that's fine, it was fair. And on the question of whether or not some rules had been violated, that case has been way overstated, because the only thing I think they've raised is whether a technical report was filed in a timely manner or something, and that's simply way overstating that case. I wanted to communicate, Mr. Speaker, on that point, and particularly because my friend from the gentleman from Franklin had asked the question. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the lady from McCracken 4 arise?
Personal point of privilege.
Point of personal privilege. Has the lady been aggrieved?
Yes, most definitely.
Well, you state your most definite grievance, ma'am.
Both the gentleman from Floyd and the gentleman from Woodford insist that certain members of the minority party were treated unfairly on the submission slip presented by the minority floor leader on the Health and Welfare Committee. And I had also put that on my request slip because of the important health and welfare initiatives being placed upon us because of steps taken at the federal level. I was scratched, and I am not on this committee, though I had requested it specifically to my leadership. Now, I might understand that I have to go around my leadership and request it specifically from the speaker if that's what I want. I'm really unclear on this. But let me, before anyone jumps to answer that question, I will want to just say that when I ran for re-election, I ran against business as usual. I ran against business behind closed doors type of procedures. I thought when I made a vote for the gentleman from Jefferson 41, that my vote was consistent with what I stated to my constituents I would be supporting. A more open type of process. Well, what we see here is not only a continuation as business as usual, but a tightening of the reins of this kind of closed door policy. Last organizational session, my understanding is that with the exception of 2 minority choices, the minority floor leaders' choices stood. Now, we see that pretty much the minority floor leaders' suggestions were scrapped if, in fact, those minority floor members actually supported the gentleman from Jefferson 41. And I would suggest that those who are being punished are the ones who did not support all of the leadership. And if we are going to continue to be penalized for not supporting the leadership, for Democrats and Republicans alike, I would say this is business as usual. This is behind closed doors procedures, and it is not fair, and it is not fair to our constituents. And I am here to represent my constituents, and if that means not supporting all of the leadership all of the time, then so be it. But I think we need to at least keep the doors open. Thank you very much.
For what purpose, gentleman from Rockcastle 80 arise?
To communicate with the body, Mr. Speaker.
Please.
Point of personal privilege, whatever.
State your grievance, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have heard the minority floor leader, majority floor leader, and the majority whip make statements on the House floor today that what they had done on the Committee on Committees is to look at the request of members and to more adequately serve the request that were made by the minority party. You've just heard the lady from McCracken talk about being extradited from the Health and Welfare Committee. Let me say to you, there's not a more capable member in this House than the lady from McCracken. Now, we want to talk about what's fair, and that's all I'm asking. That's all I'm asking you to consider. We want to talk about what's fair. Last session, that same member requested to be on education. She requested to be on education, and she was turned down. Now she's requested to be on health and welfare, and she's turned down. Lady from McCracken, I don't know what they want you to serve on. I wish I did. Of course, they've made their preferences. You'll do a great job in whatever you do. Because a person differs with you on issues and views is not a reason. It's not a reason for you to be held back from committee assignments and being able to show what you believe in. But I want to follow up with one other thing. And like I said earlier, I appreciate the gentleman from Franklin's remarks. I don't think that the majority of this body wants to do what's not fair. I think the majority of this body, in your own heart, in your own mind, in your own conscience, you want to be fair to everybody. I believe that because I don't believe you'd have been elected if that wasn't the principles that you operated under. And when you come up here, sometimes you're put under pressures. You're put under pressures that don't allow you sometimes to do what you'd like. But there is one thing that I can assure you. Fairness, regardless of the cost, will always benefit you. The majority floor leader and majority whip stood and made comments about how that their list was more acceptable than ours. I've got part of my list right here in front of me. I can have copies available for every member in this House in a very short period of time. You see, because I went through and marked on this list, there's not a member, whether it be right or wrong, there's not a member in the minority party that didn't receive their number one request under our list that we sent to the Speaker. And where that is correct, gentleman from Woodford, and I can show you. That is correct, gentleman from Woodford. As you shake your head no, you're incorrect. Every member got their number one requirement. There was one member who had Rule 39 to committee. And he told me that he was willing to give that committee up for an assignment on the Appropriations and Revenue Committee. And that's the only variance. And every member got their first choice because that's what he told me he wanted to do. Now, why did he do that? Maybe because he's afraid if he didn't Rule 39, that one committee, y'all would take it too. I don't know. But I know one thing. 36 members, the entire minority caucus, got their first choice under our plan. 31 members got their second choice. 31 members got their second choice because of the way the request had come in. I've got my report available. I'm ready for anybody to look at it. It's marked on. I'll be more than happy to let you see it. And I would encourage you to look at it and then look at the report that's been filed here today. Mr. Speaker, in order to give the members of this body an opportunity to do that, and they can determine what fairness is, that's all I'm asking, I'd move that we recess for the period of 1 hour for the people to look at the two reports. We'll make them available. Thank you. Ask for a roll call vote.
There's a motion to recess. Is that the motion, gentlemen? For 1 hour. Is there a second? Motion and a second. It is a debatable motion. Not debatable. Not debatable. Did you have a point of order, gentleman from Jefferson 46?
It's not debatable. I can't.
Yeah, right. Not debatable. The motion is that we do now recess for a period of 1 hour. All members in favor vote aye. Those opposed nay. And the roll call machine is open for your vote. Is it open? Have all members voted? Clerk, take the roll. Roll call shows, machine showing 36 members voting aye, 53 members voting nay. The motion is lost. Mr. Clerk, can you see if there, I'm not sure if there were any other people who wanted to be recognized. Gentlemen, what purpose, gentleman from Fleming 70, arise?
Mr. Speaker, what order of business are we in?
We're in motions, petitions, and communications, and we've been in it about an hour, and we're way over 30. Are you making the point, the 30-minute rule?
I would like to communicate with the body if it's okay. If we're over time, I would relinquish my...
Well, we'll be in announcements. The next order of business is announcements, and you can announce, and that will mean you can communicate.
That'd be fine.
Please proceed.
Are we in announcements?
We are wherever you want. Yes, we're in announcements. We're in announcements, yes, sir. You can announce.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to announce to this body, or I'd really like to communicate with this body. I've been here 20 years. It's my 20th year. And I've been here through some pretty rough times when the minority party and the majority party really fought and really clashed. But you know, there's never been a time since I've been in the General Assembly like this. If I look to the other end of the hall and what's going on down there, and I think about the importance of this House and this next 2 years of what's going on in Kentucky, I think it's time when we come together. And if we want to talk about fairness, let's think about the Senate. When they threw my good friend, Senator Eck Rose, out of the presidency. And let's talk about a closed-door meeting that I'm advised that Senator McConnell had with the minority members down there and said, you got to come to the table to bring this into chaos because the 1999 election's coming for governor and we'll have a chance. Let's talk about brutal politics in Kentucky, because that's what's happening, my friend. That is what's happening. And I don't like what I see happening on this House floor today. I didn't like what I saw happening when the gentleman from Jefferson 41, my good friend, put his name in nomination. And the members of the minority party seconded the motion and then tried to cause controversy. If the members of the minority party want to put up their own nominee for Speaker Pro Tem, that's fine. And if they want to vote for their party person, that's fine. But I thought that you were doing some disruptive politics. The gentleman from Jefferson 41's got every opportunity to put his name up. And if he gets nominated, that's fine. But I think you all were wrong. And I think there were some paybacks for that. You can say anything you want to say. What I think we have to do beyond this day, and I speak to the new members probably more so than us older people, because it's important what you do in this first term. You go home 2 years from now where we done nothing but come up here and had gridlock. We act like the United States Congress, and you're going home. And some of the rest of us are going home. And I would just plead with you today to stop this bickering. Let's get on with a consensus here in this body. Let's lead some bipartisan efforts to do what's right for the people of Kentucky over the next 2 years. And let's not let what's going on in the Senate interrupt us, with the exception that they may stop some things down there. But let's try to use our consensus building to drive things through and do what's right for the people of Kentucky.
Chair recognizes Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. Speaker, the Senate has passed Senate Concurrent Resolution 6 and respectfully request concurrence of this honorable body.
Please proceed, but bring that forward. Gentleman from Taylor, earlier I saw your light on, now it's not. Did you wish to speak, sir?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.